Welcome to Lost Love Mystery, where every story unravels a secret. So, let's dive into another story. The morning sun crept through the blinds, casting a warm glow across my bedroom. As I stirred awake, I could hear the familiar sounds of my son, Aiden, playing in his room. A smile tugged at my lips, and I savored the peaceful moment before the chaos of the day unfolded. Aiden, time to get ready for school, I called out, throwing on a t-shirt and jeans. Moments later, a whirlwind of energy burst into my room, followed by the giggles of my 8-year-old son. Aiden's eyes shone with excitement as he clutched his favorite action figures in his small hands. "Morning, Dad," he exclaimed, bouncing onto the bed beside me. I ruffled his hair affectionately. "Hey, buddy, did you sleep well?" Aiden nodded vigorously, and we shared a laugh before heading downstairs for breakfast. As I poured his cereal, my wife, Layla, emerged from the bedroom, looking as radiant as ever in her business attire. "Good morning," she said, leaning in to give me a quick peck on the cheek. I smiled, drinking in her familiar scent and the warmth of her touch. "Morning, babe. Ready for another day at the office?" Layla rolled her eyes playfully. "As ready as I'll ever be. Marketing never sleeps." We shared a chuckle, and I couldn't help but feel grateful for the life we'd built together. Little did I know, the tranquility of that morning was about to be shattered. After breakfast, I ushered Aiden into the car and began the short drive to his elementary school. As we navigated the familiar streets of our quiet neighborhood, Aiden's voice broke the comfortable silence. "Dad, I don't like second dad," he blurted out, his brow furrowed in confusion. I frowned, glancing at him in the rearview mirror. "What do you mean, buddy? Who's second dad?" Aiden shifted in his booster seat, his eyes downcast. "The man who comes over when you're not home. He talks to Mom a lot." A chill ran down my spine, and I fought to keep my expression neutral. "I'll talk to Mom about it, okay?" I reassured him, forcing a smile. But as I pulled up to the school's drop-off zone, my mind was racing. What did Aiden mean? Could there really be another man involved with my wife? The thought seemed preposterous, but Aiden's innocence and honesty left me unsettled. That evening, as Layla and I sat down for dinner, I knew I had to broach the subject of Aiden's comment. I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the conversation ahead. "Layla, I need to ask you something," I began, setting down my fork. She looked up at me, her eyes curious. "What is it, Jax?" I hesitated, choosing my words carefully. "Aiden said something this morning that has me a little concerned." Layla's brow furrowed. "What did he say?" "He mentioned something about a second dad. A man who comes over when I'm not home and talks to you a lot." Layla's eyes widened, and she let out a melodious laugh. That sent a wave of relief through me. "Jackson, Aiden must be mistaken. There's no other man." I studied her face, searching for any hint of deception, but her expression was one of amused disbelief. "Okay, if you say so," I conceded, forcing a smile. "But if there's something going on, I need to know." Layla reached across the table, her soft hand covering mine. "There's nothing to worry about, trust me." As she leaned in to kiss me, I breathed in her familiar scent, letting it fill my senses. But deep down, a nagging doubt had taken root, a doubt that would soon consume me. In the days that followed, I found myself unable to shake the uneasiness that had settled over me. Aiden's words echoed in my mind, and no matter how much I tried to dismiss them, I couldn't ignore the knowing feeling that something wasn't right. One evening, as Layla worked late at the office, I decided to investigate further. With trembling hands, I logged into our online banking portal and pulled up her credit card statements. My eyes scanned the long list of charges, and my heart sank as I noticed several unexplained expenses at fancy restaurants and hotels. The evidence was mounting, but I knew I needed more proof before confronting Layla again. The next day, while she was at work, I made an impromptu visit to her office, hoping to gain some insight from her colleagues. As I wandered through the bustling marketing firm, I struck up conversations with a few of Layla's coworkers, subtly inquiring about any unusual behavior or relationships. Most of them seemed oblivious, but one young intern named Greg caught my attention. Hey, Greg, can I ask you something? I began trying to sound casual. Greg looked up from his computer, his expression open and friendly. Sure. What's up? I took a deep breath. Have you noticed Layla spending a lot of time with anyone in particular? Maybe a client or someone outside the office? Greg hesitated, his brow furrowing as he considered my question. Finally, he nodded slowly. Yeah, now that you mention it, she has been hanging around with a guy named Nolan. My heart skipped a beat. Do they seem close? I asked, my voice wavering slightly. Greg shrugged, but there was a flicker of discomfort in his eyes. Yeah, they've been spending a lot of time together. If you know what I mean. I swallowed hard, thanking Greg for his candor before making my way out of the office. As I walked to my car, my mind was a whirlwind of emotions: anger, betrayal, and an overwhelming sense of dread. The pieces were falling into place, and the truth was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. The weight of Greg's words hung heavy in the air. As I made my way back home, my mind was a whirlwind of questions and emotions, and I found myself craving the solace of my own space. As I pulled into the driveway, I noticed my neighbor Henry tending to his garden. Hey, Jackson, he called out, waving a weathered hand in greeting. I mustered a half-hearted smile, silently debating whether to confide in him. Henry had been a constant presence in our neighborhood for as long as I could remember, and his unwavering kindness and wisdom had earned him the respect of everyone around him. Henry, can I talk to you for a minute? I asked, my voice strained. The retired police officer must have sensed the gravity in my tone, for he immediately set down his gardening tools and motioned for me to join him on the porch swing. As I settled beside him, the words began to tumble out. I told him about Aiden's comment, the unexplained charges, and the concerning information from Greg. With each revelation, Henry's brow furrowed deeper, his eyes reflecting a mixture of sympathy and concern. I'm so sorry you're going through this, son, he said, placing a comforting hand on my shoulder. But you should know, I've seen another man visiting your house multiple times when you're not around. My heart sank, and I felt the blood drain from my face. What, are you sure? Henry nodded solemnly. I even have security footage from my home that shows a man leaving your house. The timestamps confirm it was during your work hours. A wave of anger and betrayal washed over me, and I clenched my fists tightly. Do you know who he is? I got a partial license plate. I can help you find out, Henry offered, his eyes filled with a fierce determination that belied his age. I swallowed hard, nodding my gratitude. Thank you, Henry. I don't know what I'd do without your help. Armed with the partial license plate information from Henry, it didn't take long to track down the man who had been visiting my home, a well-dressed individual named Nolan Hayes. As it turned out, he was a client at Layla's firm, just as Greg had mentioned. A burning rage coursed through my veins as I pored over the evidence, but I knew I needed to confront Nolan directly. I couldn't risk losing my composure and doing something reckless. Recruiting the help of my best friend Ben, we formulated a plan. The next morning, we positioned ourselves outside Nolan's office building, determined to catch him as he arrived for work. Sure enough, at precisely 8:15 a.m., a sleek black sedan pulled into the parking lot, and a sharply dressed man emerged. Nolan Hayes. My jaw clenched as I watched him straighten his tie and smooth his immaculate suit jacket. That's him, I muttered to Ben, who nodded grimly. Taking a deep breath, I stepped forward, blocking Nolan's path. His eyes widened and surprised as he took in my steely gaze. We need to talk, I said, my voice low and unwavering. Nolan hesitated for a moment, but something in my expression must have convinced him that arguing would be futile. He nodded, and we made our way to a nearby cafe, where we could have some semblance of privacy. Once we were seated, I wasted no time in laying out the facts. I know you've been seeing my wife, I stated, my voice trembling with barely contained fury, and I wanted to stop. Now, Nolan's face paled, and he shifted uncomfortably in his seat. I'm sorry, he mumbled, his gaze downcast. It was a mistake. A lapse in judgment. A mistake? I scoffed. leaning forward. You're jeopardizing my family, my marriage, my son's well-being. That's more than just a mistake. Nolan swallowed hard, and for a moment, I thought he might protest. But then, his shoulders slumped in defeat. You're right. I'll stay away from your wife and your children. I promise. I searched his face for any hint of deception, but all I saw was shame and regret. With a curt nod, I rose from my seat, leaving Nolan to contemplate the consequences of his actions. That evening, as Layla arrived home from work, I knew it was time to confront her with the truth. My hands shook as I pulled up the security footage on my laptop, bracing myself for the inevitable confrontation. Layla, we need to talk, I said, my voice wavering slightly. She must have sensed the gravity in my tone, for she immediately set down her purse and joined me on the couch. What's going on, Jax? Taking a deep breath, I turned the laptop toward her, playing the footage that showed a man, Nolan, entering and leaving our home on multiple occasions. Is this true? I demanded, my heart pounding in my chest. Layla's face crumbled as she watched the footage, her eyes welling with tears. For a moment, she remained silent, her lips trembling as she searched for the words. Yes. She finally whispered, her voice barely audible. It's true, but I'll stop, I promise. It was a mistake. I felt as though the wind had been knocked out of me. Despite all the evidence, a part of me had still clung to the hope that it was all a misunderstanding. A mistake? I echoed, my voice hollow. Layla, you've been having an affair. You've betrayed our family, our marriage vows. She broke down then, tears streaming down her face as she reached out to me. I'm so sorry, Jackson. Please, you have to believe me. It won't happen again. I wanted to believe her more than anything. But as I looked into her eyes, I saw the trust that had once been there, now shattered beyond repair. We'll see, I said, my voice cold and detached as I turned away from her, my heart heavy with the weight of her betrayal. In the days that followed Layla's tearful confession, I found myself trapped in a state of limbo. Part of me desperately wanted to believe her promises, to cling to the hope that our marriage could be salvaged. But the other part, the logical, rational part that had been irreparably damaged by her betrayal, knew that trust, once shattered, could never be fully restored. I threw myself into my work, burying myself in code and algorithms. As a means of escape, Aiden's innocent presence was my only solace, a reminder of the love and loyalty that still existed in my life. Then, one fateful evening, my world came crashing down once more. Jackson, it's me again. Henry's voice crackled through the phone, laced with a grim urgency. I saw another man into your house today. My heart plummeted to the depths of my stomach, and a cold sweat broke out across my brow. What, are you sure? Positive, Henry affirmed, his tone leaving no room for doubt. I got a good look at him this time. I squeezed my eyes shut, willing the words to be a cruel trick of my mind. But deep down, I knew the truth. Layla had betrayed me again, shattering the fragile trust we had begun to rebuild. When she finally returned home that night, leaving her phone unattended for a brief moment, I seized the opportunity. With trembling fingers, I unlocked the device, bracing myself for what I might find. The incriminating messages and photos hit me like a physical blow, confirming my worst fears. Layla had not only continued her affair with Nolan, but had now entangled herself with another man entirely. As she entered the room, her eyes widened at the sight of her phone in my hands, the damning evidence laid bare before us. Jackson, I can explain, she began, her voice trembling, but I held up a hand, silencing her. Save it, Layla. I've seen everything I need to see. In the days that followed, I found myself consumed by a burning desire for justice, not just for myself, but for Aiden and every other innocent life torn apart by deceit. I knew I had to expose the truth, to strip away the veil of lies that Layla and Nolan had so carefully constructed. And so, I reached out to the one person who deserved to know the truth, as much as I did, Nolan's wife, Isabel. We arranged to meet at a discreet cafe, away from prying eyes and wagging tongues. As I sat across from Isabel, her eyes red-rimmed and her hands trembling, I couldn't help but feel a pang of empathy. She was a victim in all this, just as I was. Wordlessly, I slid the damning evidence across the table. The photos, the messages, the proof of our spouse's betrayal. Isabel's breath caught in her throat as she took in the incriminating details, her face crumpling in anguish. "Thank you for telling me," she whispered, her voice thick with unshed tears. "I had my suspicions, but I never wanted to believe it." I nodded, understanding all too well the numbing disbelief that comes with such a devastating revelation. The next day, armed with a steely resolve, I made my way to Layla's workplace. Nolan was there, as expected, and I wasted no time in confronting them, both in front of their boss and colleagues. "This is what they've been doing," I stated, my voice ringing out across the hushed office. As I brandished the incriminating evidence, lying, deceiving, betraying their families. Their boss's eyes widened in shock and disappointment, and within moments, the hammer fell. Layla and Nolan were both fired on the spot, their careers and reputations in tatters. As I walked away from the scene, I felt a strange sense of vindication. The truth had been laid bare and justice, however small, had been served. In the aftermath of the public exposure, I knew I had to take decisive action to protect myself and Aiden. With the help of a skilled attorney, I leveraged the evidence of Layla's affair to prove that her actions had a direct and detrimental impact on the welfare of our son. But that wasn't all. During our initial discussions, my lawyer uncovered a crucial detail: the existence of a prenuptial agreement that Layla and I had signed before our marriage. Within its pages lay a clause that granted me full custody and a significant portion of our assets. In the event of infidelity, Layla, her reputation in ruins, and her finances in disarray, had little recourse but to comply. Nolan, too, found himself in a similar predicament, his once promising career reduced to ashes by the weight of his indiscretions. As the legal proceedings unfolded, I watched with a strange detachment as Layla and Nolan begged for forgiveness, their voices laced with desperation, but their pleas fell on deaf ears. The trust had been irreparably broken, and I had made my peace with the fact that our paths would forever diverge. In the end, I emerged victorious, not only in the legal battles, but in the fight to reclaim my life and my sense of self. With Aiden by my side, I turned my back on the past, ready to forge a new future built on the foundations of truth and integrity. The road ahead was uncertain, but one thing was clear: I would never again allow myself to be blinded by lies and deception. My eyes were open, and I was ready to embrace the challenges and triumphs that lay ahead, secure in the knowledge that honesty and resilience would be my guiding lights.